It was the year everything felt different. My friends and I had finally reached the age where we could trick or treat on our own, without parents tagging along. It was exciting, but there was an underlying sense of freedom, and maybe danger, that made it feel like we were crossing into unknown territory. We were 12, maybe 13, and this Halloween felt like it was going to be unforgettable. We made our way through the neighborhood, our usual route, knocking on familiar doors and getting the usual stash of candy. But as we turned down Birchwood Lane, something was off. The houses there were different, big, new, and expensive. The kind of houses that looked more like mansions than the cozy suburban homes we were used to. The street was quiet, much quieter than the usual commotion of Halloween night. It was as though the area had been forgotten by everyone but us. We started knocking on doors, but it was strange. No one answered. Most houses had their lights off, which wasn't entirely uncommon, but as we went down the lane, it felt empty. One by one, the houses we passed seemed to shut us out. We were beginning to question whether this area was as welcoming as we'd hoped. Then, at the end of the street, we came to a large house that didn't just seem abandoned. It felt eerie, like something was wrong. This house was massive, towering over the others, with dark windows that reflected the dim light of the street lamps. But there, in the second-story window, I saw her. A woman. She stood there watching us, her face pale and expressionless. I felt my stomach twist. My friends were already moving toward the front door, seemingly oblivious to the strange feeling settling in my chest. "Come on, let's go," one of my friends urged. He was already on the porch, ringing the doorbell. Reluctantly, I followed them. The woman in the window didn't move, just stared at us. We waited a moment, unsure of what to expect. But soon, the door creaked open, revealing the woman. She smiled, a strange, almost mechanical smile, and gestured for us to come in. "I have something special for you," she said, her voice smooth like syrup. We hesitated, but the lure of candy was too strong. She stepped aside, and we shuffled in, our footsteps echoing in the vast entryway. The air inside was heavy with an odd, musty scent. As soon as the last one of us stepped in, the door clicked shut behind us. The woman led us down a long, dimly lit hallway. We could hear her footsteps, too, slow, deliberate, and much heavier than they should have been for her frail frame. But it was hard to focus on anything other than the candy display she had set up on a table at the end of the hallway. It was a perfect Halloween spread, candy in every shape and color, wrapped in shiny foil. But something about it felt wrong, too perfect, too staged. Suddenly I felt it, a sharp chill that ran up my spine. Something wasn't right. The footsteps we heard earlier, they weren't coming from her. They were coming from somewhere behind us, heavier now, as if someone or something was following us. I turned to look and my blood ran cold. There, at the far end of the hall, was a shadow, a large, dark shape that wasn't there before. It was moving closer, fast. I didn't wait to see what it was. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing my friend's arm. We bolted, racing for the door. But the hallway felt longer now, stretching out into infinity as our panic grew. The door was locked, and the woman wasn't there to unlock it. We were trapped. The footsteps were closer now, thudding loudly, relentlessly. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, my breath quick and shallow. Then out of nowhere, the door burst open, and we tumbled out onto the porch. We didn't stop to look back. We just ran. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of the main road, gasping for breath, terrified and confused. Our hearts were still racing, and even then as we looked back down Birchwood Lane, the house was dark again. The woman was gone. The street was quiet, too quiet. We never told our parents what happened. I don't know why. Maybe because we were afraid they wouldn't believe us, or maybe because we didn't want to sound crazy. But I think we all knew there was something dark about that house, something we hadn't even begun to understand. The thing that scares me most now is that, even though we escaped, I can't shake the feeling that whatever we encountered that night was waiting for us to come back. And I'm sure that house is still there, just as empty as before, waiting. The Christmas season had always been a time of warmth and familiarity in our house. Despite losing our mother a few years ago, we had found a rhythm, a routine that kept us moving forward. My dad did his best, and while the holidays were hard, he managed to make them feel special. But this year, everything felt different. It was as if the usual comfort had been replaced with something colder. That December, Dad had introduced us to someone new. Her name was Beth, and she was kind in her own way. She was the type who smiled a lot, but there was something in her smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She seemed nice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way she seemed to always be in the background, silently watching us. Or maybe it was the fact that I caught her lingering by my dad, whispering to him when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It wasn't just her. Something in the house felt wrong. We'd always been close, my dad and me. But ever since Beth moved in, he had been distant, like he was constantly distracted. We'd lost the connection we once had, replaced by uncomfortable silences. It was hard to explain, but I felt it in my bones. One night I woke up to a strange noise coming from downstairs. It was late, much later than I expected my dad to be awake. I decided to investigate, my curiosity pulling me out of bed. As I tiptoed down the hall, I could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps and the clink of something metallic. I froze. I'd heard it before. The sound of the drawer opening. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach as I crept closer to the living room, where the faint light from the kitchen illuminated the dark hallway. I peered around the corner. There she was, Beth, standing by the kitchen counter, a small pile of cash in her hand. My heart pounded in my chest. My first instinct was to turn and run, but something held me there. Beth didn't notice me, too focused on counting the money, and then she slipped it into her coat pocket, making sure to close the drawer quietly. I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't know what to make of it, but I knew something wasn't right. Later that week, I began noticing small things. My dad's medication had been tampered with. The pills were always missing or crushed. At first I thought I was imagining things, but then I saw her. Beth had been in the medicine cabinet again, this time with a small vial of something, slipping it inside her purse. My mind raced. What was she doing? Why was she sneaking around like this? Was she after something more than just our money? I couldn't keep quiet anymore. That night, I confronted her. I had to know what was going on. I'd had enough of the whispers, the strange glances, and the secrets. I found her in the hallway, just outside my bedroom door, looking as though she had been waiting for me. "Beth," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, the faint smell of her perfume overpowering my senses. I took a step back, my instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. Her eyes narrowed, cold and calculating. "You don't know anything, Sydney," she said, her voice low and steady. "You don't know what your father is really doing, but you will. You'll learn soon enough." My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to run, but my legs felt frozen to the floor. There was no way out. She stepped forward again, her hands reaching out for me. The dark intent in her eyes was unmistakable. I could feel the weight of the danger closing in around me. I knew she wasn't the woman she pretended to be, that she wasn't here for us. There was something sinister behind her motives. "Stay away from my dad," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. But before she could answer, I heard the sound of Dad's footsteps coming from the stairs. Beth straightened, her face slipping back into that strange, forced smile. "Don't worry, Sydney," she said, her tone soft. "It's all just a misunderstanding." I didn't believe her, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't expose her, not yet. Not when she was so much closer than I could ever imagine. That night I lay awake, listening to the quiet hum of the house, knowing that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't tell my dad, not yet. He wouldn't believe me, and maybe deep down, I was scared of what Beth might do if I pushed too hard. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let my guard down. I had to keep watching. Because I wasn't sure if she was going to hurt me or if she was after something much worse.